Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the University of Elk Hunting. Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most comprehensive course for beginners all the way to elite level elk hunters, from beginning to end, covering all the bases of planning the hunt to scouting, elk behavior, fitness, gear, and just about everything in between. This course, as it's going in my fourth year of going through it, each year Corey makes some improvements, and even if he didn't make any improvements, I would review it every single year because there's so many things to it. It's such a big course with so much information in it that it's really good to review it, on an annual basis. With the app that the University of Elk Hunting has, you can download these videos and take them into the field with you. So, for example, if you have never done the gutless method before for taking care of field game of field dressing an animal, you can take that video on your phone, download it when you have cell service, and when you get in the field, you can watch it. Because if you haven't done it before, it can seem a little bit complicated and hard to remember what a video you watched, a month before the season. So that's extremely helpful. Corey is giving all the listeners, so all of you guys and girls, 20% off of the course by using the code EastMeetsWest. So you can check that out at elk101.com. Also, Maven Optics. Maven has come out with the highest quality optics on the market with a direct-to-consumer business model to keep the price down, about half the price of their competitors, with customer service that is second to none in the industry. Their company is small, their team is small, and they do that on purpose. They're not looking to become the biggest optic company in the world. They want to have the best quality optics and customer service. So they do that through all in-house. When you call they have a full lifetime no-fault warranty. You call with any issues, you'll be able to talk to a real person who will be able to help you out and take care of any of those issues. So Maven is offering everyone a free gift with any full price optics order off the website by using the code EastMeetsWest-gift. And with hunting seasons approaching, hopefully everyone's out there using their gear and testing all of that, and a part of your gear should be your food that you plan to take. So Heather's Choice has come out with the highest quality, high protein, high fat meals and snacks for the backcountry, for traveling, and just about anything in between. So Heather is offering free shipping on any orders over $99 with the code EastMeetsWest. If you want to just try out some of their packaroons, which is like a little coconut cookie that's healthy for you, you can still order those and help out by clicking on the link that we have on the partners page or in the show notes here. Check that out at heatherschoice.com. So with that out of the way, this week on the podcast, I have Greg Godfrey from Tethrd. So we're going to talk about saddle hunting. I'm really, really excited about this one, as saddles have been something that I've really recently looked into, probably in the last couple of years, but was really skeptical of it until I actually got to climb into one myself. And I think I'm going to give one a shot this year. It makes sense to give it a try. I'm not saying it's going to work for everything. I don't know that. But I truly think that it could be really beneficial for mobile hunting through the Appalachian region here, big woods, whitetail hunting. So I'm really pumped to get to check that out and see what happens. This past weekend, I was at the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Muster in the Mountains. That event was absolutely killer. I mean, the amount of people that showed up it was a beautiful weather weekend after the flooding and everything we had in the week leading up to it. Had a lot of nice weather. It's good food, beer, bands, games, wild game cooking, just about everything, and just a bunch of public landowners getting together and, sharing stories, everything like that. That event was really awesome, and I'm really looking forward to it next year. And it's just, like I said, it's cool to see everyone get together and also get to meet, so many other like-minded people. In addition, I have some really cool apparel designs coming out here, some new ones, mountain buck hats, working on that right now, and some other different items that if you are following along on social media, either on my personal page at bo.martonic on Instagram or at East Meets West Hunt, you check that out. I'm going to be putting a bunch of different designs up and seeing what people like and don't like. I mean, the feedback helps out a ton. I really like, negative feedback, positive feedback, whatever it is, all that stuff helps. I mean, that goes that way with everything with this podcast, because the information I'm trying to put out and the apparel and stuff, I want it to be, beneficial for everybody, and it doesn't help, anyone really if you're holding those thoughts in. So feel free to give me a shot if you don't like it, or if you do like it, I love hearing that as well. So definitely be looking forward to some new stuff there. Trying to mix in with these podcasts a mix of the whitetail stuff for hunting the big woods and the Appalachian Mountains, as well as ramping up for the Western hunting. So you'll probably see some more Western hunting stuff right now, and it'll switch to more whitetail oriented stuff come the end of September into October, November there. But still gonna mix up a whole bunch of different things here. So I really appreciate everyone listening and helping this podcast grow and to help me be able to get more people on. I have a ton of episodes recorded, including at Muster in the Mountain that I was telling you about with BHA. I did a co-branded podcast with Clint Campbell from Truth from the Stand. We interviewed Lan Tawney, who is the president and CEO of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, as well as a gentleman from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, to talk about some of the new, hunting regulations and some of the turmoil that's kind of came of that. So be looking for that in the future. And the last thing I want to say before I jump over to the podcast with Greg is, on the website, I just released a new blog that is all about Pennsylvania elk hunting application strategy. So Pennsylvania has made some major changes, as I mentioned a little bit on the last podcast with Cody Rich. And I kind of broke down all those changes so that they're easier to understand, because it's not really easy to understand unless you do a ton of research on it. So I broke that down, try to help you be able to apply and hopefully draw one of those once-in-a-lifetime tags that we have to hunt these giant bulls here in Pennsylvania. So with that being said, let's get right into the podcast here with Greg Godfrey. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. Today I have on the line a guest from down in Georgia, Greg Godrey from Tethrd. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah, man. Nice to be here with you, Bo. Appreciate you having me. I was just out today. I was doing a little fishing. The weather is fantastic here. Hopefully it's the same up there in PA.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice day, but unfortunately I was working in a factory and didn't get to enjoy it that much as you did, I guess. But my brother's just moved out to Colorado, and he was sending me pictures. He was fishing all day. He was just got out of active duty in the Air Force and went out there for gunsmithing school, and he's got about 3 weeks off, and he's just traveling and fishing. So I'm pretty jealous of both of you.
Yeah, I lived in Colorado for a while. I'm active duty Army myself, and I was stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado. So I lived there for about 3 years, and man, that place is glorious. I'm a little jealous of your brother right now.
Yeah, he's got an awesome place. I was just texting him today, trying to plan a trip, a long weekend for me to go out and visit. So
there you go. You should do it.
Yeah, definitely. I love that state. But anyways, Greg, so I asked you to come here on the podcast because of the company you have, Tethrd, and to talk about saddle hunting a little bit. Think you can help me out talking about that?
Absolutely. It's pretty much consumed my life for the past better part of a decade. So yeah, any chance I get to come on the podcast and talk about saddle hunting and being a more efficient mobile hunter, man, I love the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, thanks. So if you want to start out by just giving a little background of yourself and then kind of your journey getting into saddle hunting.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned a minute ago that I'm active duty Army, and that's where my pursuit of the ultimate ultralight, efficient, just super user-friendly system came from. The Uncle Sam has a way of moving you around a lot more frequently than you would like. So I found myself having to learn new areas every 2 to 3 years. So I hunted in Georgia and Colorado and upstate New York and back to Georgia a couple different times. And each move, I had to learn a completely new environment. So out in the Rockies, it's completely different than where I grew up in Northwest Florida. I was hunting mountains and hills and then even prairies in the eastern side of the state. And then I got to do that for a couple of years, and then Uncle Sam moved me up to upstate New York. I was up on the northeast corner of Lake Ontario at Fort Drum in a little town called Watertown, New York, which is about 20 minutes south of the Canadian border. And so that was more hardwood ridges, more farmland, more typical Midwestern or Northeastern terrain. So yet another style that I had to figure out. And then the Army again down to where I am now in Savannah, Georgia, which now I'm hunting coastal swamp deer. So I have a lot of experience hunting a lot of different types of terrain and different deer in their different habitats. And it kind of forced me to figure out a system that was really efficient, really lightweight, and that's kind of how my saddle hunting journey got started back in 2009. In Fort Carson, Colorado, when I was sick of hiking up and down those hills with the climbing tree stand, because I'm an Eastern guy, right? And a lot of people out west, they don't hunt with tree stands. They go and they'll find a hillside and sit in glass. Well, that was totally foreign to me coming from the deep south. It was just absolutely foreign concept. So I took my Eastern style of hunting out there. So I was lugging around a climb and tree stand, and it worked. I mean, I killed a couple of deer and I was on some elk, but it just wasn't very efficient. It's too heavy, too bulky. And that's when I found the saddle back in 2009. And ever since then, when I started hunting out of a trophy line tree saddle, and then I kind of just the process started where I was constantly pursuing, like I said, just lighter weight, more efficient, smaller, less bulk. And then we get to where we are now with the launch of Tethrd, which is a pretty cool company.
Yeah. So when did you launch Tethrd?
We launched Tethrd last summer, last June.
Okay, so it's still a relatively new company, I'm sure, but for you, it's been in the works for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been in the works for quite a while, so it's not even a year old yet. We'll turn 1 year old next month, but yeah, like I said, it's been basically in prototype stage for the better part of a decade. Yeah.
That's crazy. And it's funny that how you took kind of your Eastern perspective out west, and like it's so new to me, when I went out west and when I was hunting elk and stuff, just like you said, I'm so used to hunting from tree stands and everything else that it's a whole nother world. That's for sure.
It really is. And it's fun to you learn a new skill set and stretch your abilities out there. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. But you can also be successful hunting from an elevated position out there. I killed 2 deer from a tree stand, and I was on several elk, all from tree stands. And I had no clue what I was doing. I'd never been further west than Texas in my life when I got stationed out in Fort Carson. So I learned it all as I was going, and I was pretty successful out there.
Yeah, and it's funny when you were saying how you were moving, every 2 to 3, 4 years, and you were it was just long enough for you to start to get in the hang of it, and then you got to move and relearn.
Man, I have complained about that so many times. It's like, oh yeah, because it takes you. So I should know. I'm not a very good hunter, so I'll just put that out there in the beginning. But it takes me about 2 to maybe 3 seasons to kind of figure it out. That's what it did in Colorado. And then that's what it took me in upstate New York. And then exactly what you just said. As soon as you got it figured out, you've got 2 or 3 spots that you have nailed down. You found those bucks' living rooms, and then it's time to go. It's pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I could imagine it would be. Yeah, I've known just from hunting different states and stuff how difficult it can be. I remember even when I started hunting Southern Ohio, it's similar terrain than here, but it was different. It was not as tall of hills, but steeper, and just figuring out how the bucks move it. It took me, I think it was my 3rd year before I started actually killing deer there, but yeah, for you, your home just kept moving along with it, so there was a lot of adjustments, that's for sure.
Yep, and I would agree with that timeline. I think you're right on. I think for most guys, 2 to 3 seasons is what it's going to take for you to figure an area out.
Yeah, I definitely, when I go to scout a new area, I call it basically a 3-year plan, by whether that's with running trail cameras and scouting and, in season, post season, spring scouting, all of that. It takes me 3 years to have some things figured out, because you can scout so much and have an idea, but you don't really know how they're moving until you're sitting in the stand or have camera pictures, whatever it might be. But that's interesting. So what kind of, I know you said that you discovered the saddle and kind of were all in on it. What made you decide that you wanted to start your own company with it?
Well, we couldn't get the things that we wanted. There was a group of us saddle hunters that started Tethrd. We all came from an online forum called saddlehunter.com. And for years, we were forced to DIY and hack together the types of gear that we wanted. So we would go and buy an old Lone Wolf tree stand on eBay or Craigslist, cut the seat off, turn it into the platform that we wanted for saddle hunting. We would buy gear that was made for a different purpose and alter it with a sewing machine or something else in order to make it work for us. And we just got to the point where finally there was a handful of us that said, you know what, screw it. Let's just bite the bullet and make this stuff, and we won't have to do that anymore. We won't have to find our gear on Craigslist and eBay. We can just go somewhere and buy it.
Yeah. Okay. So when you came up with this idea to do Tethrd, so kind of explain what are the advantages that you found? Obviously the size of a saddle, but give me some more information on saddle hunting and why you've really dove into it.
So if you've never heard of saddle hunting before, if your listeners have no clue what we're talking about, a saddle hunting is essentially, it's almost like a rock climbing harness and a hammock, fell in love and turned into a hunting product. It's essentially a replacement for a traditional tree stand safety harness, where you would climb the tree and then you would hook up your saddle like you would hook up your safety harness. But then instead of sitting on a traditional metal tree stand and facing away from the tree, you tie into your tree saddle in front of your body, and then you sit facing the tree. So one of the benefits that provides is that you get to hide behind the tree and it helps camouflage your outline. So the way I typically set up is I will set up where I expect the deer to come from 12 o'clock, or let's call it due north. There's bedding area to the north, and there is cornfield to the south. I'm going to get in a tree and sit on the south side of that tree and keep the tree in between me and the northern bedding area where I think they're going to come from. So now, obviously, deer, and they don't always follow the script. But if you can set up behind the tree from where you expect the deer to come from, now you can use that tree as camouflage, and it'll break up your outline better. That's one of the major benefits. The other benefits are, you kind of already hit on it, Bo. It's ultralight. I mean, our saddle weighs about 16 ounces, 15 ounces. It's right around there, depending on your size, somewhere between 15 and 18 ounces. So you compare that to a 15 to 18 pound tree stand if you're talking some of the lighter ones, like your typical lone wolf tree stand that a lot of the run and gun guys are using. I mean, you're talking anywhere from 11 to 15 pounds, and now you're talking 15 to 18 ounces. So it's a gigantic weight savings, and then it's also a huge bulk savings. So I wear my saddle in just like you would your safety harness. I assume most guys put their tree stand safety harnesses on at the truck and they walk in with it. That's how I do my saddle. I put it on at the truck. I walk in with it. So I don't even know it's there. There's no big heavy thing to lug in on my back. So it helps with camouflage. It is a huge reduction in weight and bulk. And then finally, there's lots of benefits, but the other one that I always like to bring up is that it allows you to shoot 360 degrees around pretty much any tree. So with a traditional tree stand, you're sitting facing away. Now, if it's a really small tree, you can probably stand up, spin around, and shoot to your 6 o'clock directly behind you. But on if it's a tree, maybe a basketball size or beach ball size tree or bigger, you're going to have a real problem shooting directly behind you in a traditional tree stand. With a saddle, you don't have those limitations. You can truly shoot 360 degrees around the tree. While that might not be a huge benefit to some folks, I've definitely encountered the scenario where I needed to get to that dead spot, and I was able to do it in a tree saddle.
Yeah, and that right there is where I saw a huge benefit in it. And when before we started recording, I was telling you I was up in Alberta, and what I had learned from Jim Hole Jr., who was the guide up there, was he set all his tree stands facing away from where the deer would be coming from, and taught you to lean into the tree, and so you could shoot around and everything. And luckily, the trees up there were a lot smaller than you find in typical hardwood forest, here, that you could shoot a little bit around, but you still had limitations. But the reason for him, setting us up that way was exactly what you said, for camouflage, hiding movement, and everything else, and always, being ready. And I just recently experienced putting a saddle on for the first time, one of your Tethrd, your Mantis system there, and with Ali DeAndrea and Nick Berger, they had ones they were trying out, and it was the first day they were using it. They're like, Bo, throw this on and see how it is. And I couldn't believe, the movements that you could get out of it and move around the tree, and it was just so lightweight, and it felt natural, like you said, kind of like a rock climbing harness would be. And I don't know, it was just a really interesting thing. And the biggest thing I noticed that I wasn't thinking of from, when I first heard about saddles was your shot angle, or I guess your body positioning when you're shooting, is the way you lean into it is you don't have to worry about throwing your form off by dropping your elbow or anything else. And that to me was pretty interesting, and definitely a lot of people can screw up those shots that are close range from an elevated position because of their form not being on.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. I mean, in a traditional tree stand, you're standing directly vertical, and you have to make sure that you bend at the waist so to keep that proper T-form and keep everything in alignment. Well, with a saddle, I mean, you still have to pay attention to those things, but you're coming off the tree you're not vertical. You're coming off more at an angle, and it just helps you keep that more proper form. Allie actually did a really good job explaining that. I think she did a YouTube video on it. I saw her YouTube video, and she did a good job explaining how that geometry works and why it helps you it's a little bit easier on your form.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it was funny when we set it up that night. We didn't use sticks or anything, just set it up right off the ground to get the feel for it. And it really only took me probably 3 or 4 minutes to figure out kind of how to set it up and get the feel for it. I don't know. When I pictured it, I just pictured you just swinging from a tree, and that was pretty false when I got to use it with your platform and everything else there to put your feet on.
Yep. And another thing that I always like to point out is how much more stable you can get in the platform, because so let's think about it. When you're standing in a traditional tree stand, you have 2 points of contact. You've got your left foot and your right foot on that platform. That's it. When you're in a saddle setup, not only do you have both feet on something solid, but now you've got your hips supported directly into the tree trunk. So it's ultra stable at your hips. And I even go so far as a lot of times to put a knee on the tree whenever I'm hunting to even keep me more stable. And I have found that you can get absolutely rock solid positioning once you figured out the system like you talked about.
Yeah. It was there was a little different depending on your height, how you set up as far as where you put your, I guess your rope, or I'm not sure the exact technical terms of it, but
your tether. Yeah, we call it a tether.
Yeah, your tether. Well, it makes sense in the company, but
yeah, there you go.
But just the angle of it and everything, once you got that figured out, and what I thought was also cool, which I'm sure you were going to touch on, was just you can do it from almost like a standing position, or you can lower it and sit and put your knees against the tree, your legs around the tree. There's a bunch of different ways that, say, if you're sitting all day, if you're packing into, say the mountains in Pennsylvania here, and you're going to sit all day during the rut, I feel like there's a lot more options to stay comfortable, which is what was one of my other big concerns, was how can you sit in that all day and be comfortable? But there's a lot of different positions that you can set up in.
Yes, 100% right. Now, in a traditional tree stand, you've basically got 2 positions. You can sit on your butt or you can stand up. That's essentially it. You've got those same positions in a saddle. However, you can sit a multitude of different ways. You can sit side saddle, kind of leaning up against your hips against the tree. You can straddle the tree if the tree's not too terribly big. You can sit with your knees into the tree. You can stand up. You can lean backwards away from the tree. You can turn sideways and lean against the tree. There's just so many different ways. That is probably the most common question that we get, is there's no, as guys say, how can that be comfortable? Well, it really is. You can absolutely hunt all day long, no problem. It's not an issue. I totally understand where guys are coming from when you first see it. And if anyone has any experience in the rock climbing world and they're thinking that this is a rock climbing harness, there's no way I would want to hang in one of those all day long. But this is much different. The geometry and the physics and the engineering that went into this thing, the Mantis saddle, is it's pretty amazing, and it's incredibly comfortable. 100% you can sit all day and be totally comfortable.
Yeah, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, Craig, just yesterday on the phone, and he's like, "Hey, I saw that you were with Nick and Allie and you were trying out those saddles." He goes, "I just ordered one of the Tethrd systems." He goes, "I used the saddle," he goes, "I can't remember," he goes, 10, 15 years ago. And he goes, "I just remember it was like a big diaper. It was uncomfortable and it was a struggle." He goes, "This new system looks like it's really comfortable, just the way that it molds around your body, and you can adjust the leg straps and everything else." And so that was kind of cool to hear. And I'm guessing a lot of people that were early saddle adopters may have had more of a negative impact from sitting all day in one of those older style saddles, if that's correct.
Well, that's kind of what I started with. The product he's referring to is the Trophy Line tree saddle, and that's what I started hunting with back in 2009. That was the first one I ever had. A lot of people affectionately call it the camo diaper. And he's right. It wasn't terribly comfortable. It was really big and overbuilt. I think the thing weighed almost 10 pounds. And it was built really well. It was just really heavy webbing. Big patches of fabric that just weren't necessary. And saddle hunting has come a long way in weight, in bulk, and in comfort.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it's funny, like you said, how it's come a long ways. And especially, I think now with, I feel like in the last 5 to 10 years, the idea of mobile hunting has really exploded quite a bit. And everyone's looking for lighter weight options to go in. I was the guy that just used a climber forever. And then I adopted, a lightweight hang-on stand and stick setup. And that's worked a lot better for me than a climber. But at the same time, I want to be able to, or what I do a lot of times is I'm moving. I'm always trying to find the hot sign and just set up. So I'm walking around with the stand on my back and the sticks and everything else. And if you're doing that, for a better part of a day and you're trying to be quiet and everything else, that can get heavy. And, I'm carrying in a frame style pack that I use out west because of that fact,
Yeah. I mean, it's, you bring up a really good point. I mean, each system has their pros and cons, right? But I mean, if lightweight is one of the main things that you're concerned about, well, then a saddle it's impossible to beat.
When you're saying that, there might, there's some pros and cons to each. If you had to like figure out like some cons, I guess, with it, what would those be?
Well, one of it is the learning curve. There's definitely a learning curve to it, and there's also your body kind of has to get used to it. So I call that getting in saddle shape. It doesn't necessarily refer to being ultra fit or that you have to be able to do a bunch of push-ups or run a mile super fast. It's not really that kind of shape. But when you're used to just sitting on a metal seat in the woods, and then you transition to a saddle, it just takes your body a little bit of time to get used to the different geometry. When you're hanging as opposed to sitting on a seat, you just get support and pressure in different parts of your lower body, and it just takes time to get used to it. So a lot of guys can be a little uncomfortable in the beginning, and that's totally normal. Not everyone is. I sent my brother one of our prototypes one of our saddles last fall. He was going to Kentucky for a week-long hunt in the rut, and he had never been in one before. I sent it to him. He rolled into Kentucky, tried it on the very first morning, and he hunted all weekend. He said he was never uncomfortable once. That was not my experience. My experience was it took me several hunts of being, mildly uncomfortable to get it figured out. And I would say that it's a pretty even split. Half the guys grab it, and it sounds like you were kind of that half, that you just grabbed it and you immediately in 10, 15 minutes, you had it all figured out. And then there's other guys that it takes you, a couple hunts, 2, 3, 4 hunts where you got to figure it out, and maybe you're a little uncomfortable. But in the end, if you put in the effort, you'll get it figured out. That's one of the cons, is that it takes a little bit of time to figure it out. The second one is it's not really that intuitive of a system in the beginning. I like to use the analogy, if a caveman walked up to a tree, he was in the modern times, he was frozen, and he got thawed out, and he walked into the woods, and he saw a tree stand with a ladder going up to it. A caveman could kind of put the pieces together right then and there. He'd be like, oh, yeah, I can kind of climb that thing and sit on that gray metal thing, and I could ambush game from an elevated position. Like, that kind of makes sense. But if there was a saddle sitting there at the base of the tree, it wouldn't make sense. There's a little bit of a learning curve there. It's not totally intuitive. So there's kind of a physical barrier where you kind of have to get in saddle shape. There's a little bit of a mental barrier where you got to kind of learn a new system. And those are a couple of cons. And then the third con that I always like to point out is that you can get a tree stand, a climber, a lock-on, pretty much anywhere. You can roll into Walmart and get one anywhere in the country, but you can't do that with a saddle. So it's difficult to try out and figure out the system without purchasing one or having a buddy that lets you try one out. So those are kind of the main 3 cons that I like to bring up, or is that, there's a little bit of a learning curve both mentally and physically, and that it's not as easy to try it out. So you got to have to bite the bullet and buy one, and then, risk having to return it, or, find a buddy that's got one that you can test it out.
So one question, like a certain tree setup that I have in my mind, and I was trying to figure out how you would use a saddle on it, is if you're in like a hemlock or a pine tree and it has a lot of branches, are you still able to use it then, or would it be a little bit tougher? How would that work?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a real conducive saddle setup tree.
Mm-hmm.
So even in a traditional hang-on stand, so you're going to climb up and you're going to clear out a few branches to make yourself a little pouch inside that hemlock, and then you're basically going to be limited to what, let's say, like, if 12 o'clock is straight ahead, you're going to be able to shoot them from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, something like that, out of the tree stand. So you would essentially be in the same scenario. You would be really limited to having to spin around and shoot behind you or do a whole lot of trimming. So I wouldn't say that a cedar or a hemlock would be a really good saddle tree option. In that scenario, I'd probably say stick with a hang-on.
Yeah, okay. That's just what I was kind of wondering, how that would work out. Like you said, there's limits to even a hang-on stand and those type of setups too, but just wanted to kind of bring that up.
Yeah, you could do it, but like I said, I mean, you'd basically be limited to that same 10 to 2, except it would be reversed for you because you would shoot behind you, which is actually a really easy shot to make in a saddle. Shooting to your 6 o'clock when you're sitting in a saddle is super easy. But yeah, you'd be limited to that. I'm going to say, so the clock would be reversed in this scenario. So you'd be shooting from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, something like that.
Gotcha. Okay. What about, as far as the different types of setups that you can do with a saddle, as far as some people use them without a platform and then other do with them. And can you kind of explain how that works, or what you've found to work best?
Yeah, there's basically two schools of thought when it comes to what do you do with your feet. Outside of, hey, is that comfortable? That question is the number one question. The second most asked question is, what do you do with your feet? And there's basically two schools of thought. You have what I like to call a pivot style platform, which is a little miniature, like a super tiny tree stand. When I mentioned earlier, when you asked about how we were making these saddles, and I said we would go find a lone wolf tree stand and cut the seat off to make a little platform. So you can put that mental image in your head. The size, about the same size as a lone wolf tree stand seat. That's what we're calling these little platforms, and we'll go in and we'll lock that onto the tree and use that as kind of our base. And you kind of pivot your feet around that little platform in order to shoot around the tree. But then there's other guys that like a ring style platform where you would put either screw-in steps or strap-on steps around a ring around the tree, and then you would kind of walk around the tree as necessary in order to shoot around the tree. So there's two basic styles. Either you kind of pivot around on a little platform, or you walk around the tree in a ring. There's pros and cons to each method. The one that I like to point out that is the biggest pro for me is the comfort. I hunted exclusively from a ring style platform for when I first started, from 2009 until probably 3 or 4 years ago, and probably 2016-ish, 15-ish, something like that. So anyway, but that screw-in step around the tree or a strap-on tree step around the tree is not nearly as comfortable as having that little miniature platform to put your feet on. And also for guys, it also makes the transition to a saddle setup a little bit easier because you've got that little piece of familiarity with that little platform. Some guys struggle going straight to a ring style platform just because it's a little bit trickier to figure out the mechanics. It's not as comfortable. I think there's a little bit more movement involved because you do tend to walk around the tree a little bit more, so your body moves a little bit more. So I prefer the little pivot style or the little platform for platform option. But there's absolutely nothing in the world wrong with a ring style or those tree steps around the tree. John Eberhart, who I like to call the godfather of saddle hunting, he's been saddle hunting since the early 80s. So he's got nearly 40 years in a saddle, and he hunts exclusively from that ring style platform. He loves it. So you can absolutely be a killer from a ring, from either style of platform. I just think that the little platform, we call it the Predator platform. That's the one from Tethrd. But I think it's just more comfortable, and it's a little bit easier to execute all the shots around the tree.
Okay. So where would you put your bow at if you were in the tree to be the most effective?
So I'm a right-handed shooter, so I hang the bow about shoulder height on the left-hand side of the tree. So if I'm looking at the tree, I'm expecting the deer to come from noon. 6 o'clock is directly behind me. I'm going to hang my bow at like 10 o'clock on the tree.
Okay. And then you said you put, like, say if you're using like a hanger system, you're going to put that around shoulder height, or is that where you're going to have the bow handle at?
Yeah, I'm going to have the bow handle at about shoulder height.
Okay, so that you can still shoot underneath it and not have any conflict with the bow arm or anything else.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that was a similar setup to the way that we had it, set up in Alberta. We'd have it off to that side so you could, because that's the side you're hoping to shoot from, most of the time. And instead of having to go to the right side of the tree, or like say your 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock area. Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, that I think for me personally, the platform style would be more fit to use, and just from getting to try that out, I don't really see any big limitations to it, and it just seems like the comfort would be, that much more.
It is. There's not a lot of cons, so it's a little bit heavier. So most of the ring style platform, I mean, you can get super light with the ring style platforms, really light, probably less than a pound and a half. And they're not very bulky. So there's definitely some pros to the ring style platform, but the only one that's commercially available, the Predator platform from Tethrd, it weighs about 3 pounds. And it packs up flat, so it's super tiny. The only con to that system is if you're hunting in a bigger tree. My measurement that I like to use is like a basketball. If the tree is much bigger than a basketball at hunting height, then shooting directly behind the tree, so like your 12 o'clock, can be a little bit difficult because the tree kind of gets in the way. And what I'll do and what some other guys do is they'll put a strap-on step or a screw-in step off to the left-hand side, just one of them on the left-hand side of the tree, so you can, move around the tree to shoot on that top side of the tree.
Okay.
But that's really the only limitation. So if you're hunting a tree that's about a basketball size or smaller at hunting height, you won't have any problem shooting 360 degrees.
Okay. And you were saying, so I guess your setup, if you're using the Predator platform and the Mantis system, you're probably looking at like 4 pounds is what you're looking at there.
All in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, you got to throw in your rope, so you're probably talking closer to about 6 pounds.
Okay, so about 6 pounds, and most of that not most of it, part of it you're wearing on your body as you're walking in, and so that's not really any difference than a regular harness that you'd be wearing as far as weight goes. And then in addition, then you're bringing in steps. So you're bringing like a lone wolf step, or the ones I have are the hawk helium steps, something like that to be able to climb the tree with. Yep.
So you can go crazy with it and DIY some steps, or you can spend big money and get a set of B sticks, and they only weigh like 7 or 8 pounds for the whole thing. I know guys that are climbing. They're at the tree ready to hunt under 10 pounds with the saddle set up. So, yeah, man, it just depends on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go.
Yeah, that's okay. That's kind of what I was wondering. I'm sure, like you said, there's a bunch of DIYers similar to probably the way yourself was that comes up with some pretty creative methods for it to be lightweight.
Yeah, and it's just like the hang and hunt lone wolf guys, right? They figured out some smart guy figured out that if you put a set of molly straps on them, that you can make it way more comfortable to carry like a backpack. And then the old guy figured out stick talons, and they created all these ways to make their system as light and as efficient as possible. It's the same thing with saddles. It's just we start from such a benefit in weight because, our system is just inherently if you're talking a 15-pound tree stand, which is pretty common in the mobile hunting world, versus 15 ounces, it's just right there. It's such a huge savings that you can make gains way faster with a saddle setup as opposed to a tree stand setup.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, I feel like, for me personally, I know a lot of the listeners that hunt, a lot of public land in a lot of areas, say in northern Pennsylvania, where I'm at, there's 2 million acres of public land, and most of it is what, I would consider mountainous to hill type terrain. You're hiking in a ways. That little bit of, or a lot of weight savings is huge. And to be able to do that, and, say if you're in a traditional tree stand, even in a lightweight hang-on setup like that, that I've pieced together, a lot of times, you're on day 5 of your hunt and you think you need to move 120 yards that way. It takes a lot of mental discipline to want to get down and move it, where something like that is you're wearing most of it. You grab the platform and, throw it in your pack or whatever else, and you just climb down, take the sticks as you're going, and move to the next setup.
Yeah, the heaviest part of your system is now your climbing method. So whatever you're using, whether you're using screw-in steps or like you're using your Hawk Heliums, that's the heaviest part of your system. So, and the most annoying part is the climbing system. Yeah. And I'm always cautious that I don't want to come across that as someone who is saying tree stands don't work or that they're bad or that you shouldn't use a tree stand. That's not the perspective that I'm coming at it from. Tree stands. People have been killing quality deer from tree stands for decades. It's absolutely an effective system, but it's not as efficient and it's not as lightweight as a saddle system. So if you're the kind of hunter where you want to go in deep, you're going in places that are annoying to get to, you're busting brush, you're going up and down hills, you're crossing raw water, creeks, rivers, and you need to make sure that you have the most efficient system. Well, there's no more efficient system than a saddle setup. That's where the real big bonuses come from is with your efficiency and weight.
Yeah. I think if I had a farm that I could manage with, 200 acres on it that I could leave tree stand set up, then obviously that's going to be a more efficient method. But if you're running, gunning and you're hunting public land or even, private land that has other hunters on it and you're constantly moving and adjusting to the pressure and the deer movement and the time of year, that just, for me, I just think of like, I can't even tell you how many tree stands, I have hanging in my barn that I take out and I set up. I have a certain amount of time before the season that I could set them up and everything. And then the last probably 3 years, those have just sat there, and I've went to basically one hang-on stand and stick system. And, now with, wanting to try out the, a saddle system, I just think it just makes you so much more mobile and more apt to try new areas and just, kind of have fun with it. I just think it's a pretty cool setup. And Greg, for your information, a lot of the hunting style that I'm doing here is where whenever I kill a deer, I usually use the gutless method and I pack out the deer. So when you have a tree stand plus the weight of a deer in your pack, that's absolutely sucks to carry out. If you can shave some of that weight off and to be able to do that. And the other thing, not even just weight, is just taking up space. That little platform's like nothing when I was holding it, that'll fit in your pack. You can fit it in there with meat or strap it to the outside, whatever you need to do, and just wear your actual, your harness system on the way out and your saddle setup. That's just another thing that has drawn me to this whole idea. And I think that a lot of people can benefit from it.
Yeah. It's going to lighten your load a whole lot and make that pack out a lot less intimidating. And Yeah, also another thing that I want to touch on that you just brought up about the guy that's maybe hunting private land. I got to believe that most of your listeners are the mobile public land run and gun style hunters. But think about it from a private land perspective. I mean, I talk with a lot of hunters that are switching over from tree stands because now instead of having to buy, let's just say, stick ladders, because a lot of guys that are leaving setups in the woods all the time, year after year, they're putting, an inexpensive $50 stick ladder on a tree, and then they're putting a tree stand there, right? And they're leaving that there. So now if you want to transition to being a saddle hunter, now all you got to do is leave those steps there. You've got one saddle, you climb up to the top, you hook in your saddle, and you're hunting. And that does a lot. There's a lot of benefits that come from that. Now all of a sudden, Mr. Johnny Q Trespasser comes on and he's going to sit up on your field edge and sit in your tree stand. Well, guess what? He can't do it anymore because there's no tree stand there. I keep a lot of spots set up in public land, even where I hunt here in Georgia. And now I don't have to leave a tree stand up there to give my position away. Now I can leave a set of sticks, which are a lot easier to conceal. It's not quite as easy to pick up a set of climbing sticks as it is a tree stand, so you can hide your position a little bit better. And then, Mr. Johnny Q public land hunter comes in and he wants to hunt my stuff that I left in the woods, which is perfectly his right to do because I can't claim a spot, it's public land. And, well, all of a sudden now he can't do it. He's got to tow it in his own tree stand. So there's definitely some benefits to even what I like to call, the pop around method, where you have lots of spots set up and you just pop around based on food and wind. There's benefits to that too, not just the mobile run and gun style hunting.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I didn't think of it that way. And again, I don't have a lot of experience with that style, but once you get pretty efficient with it, how long does it normally take you to climb a tree and get set up in it?
Well, how long does it take you to just do your sticks? You can probably climb a tree, so you're pretty proficient with your hawk heliums. I'm assuming you can be from the ground to hunting height in probably 4 or 5 minutes. It's not very long, right? Yeah. So now when I'm at the top of my hawk helium stick, I set my little Predator platform, which you've seen that thing. It only takes about 30 seconds to set that thing. It's so tiny. There's no weight. There's no more hanging on with one arm around the tree while you wrestle this 15-pound hunk of metal up the tree and set it. The Predator, it weighs 3 pounds. I mean, it's nothing. You just set it in 30 seconds. You climb on, you set your tether, and hang your bow. So I would say the time savings probably aren't astronomical because you still have to set your little Predator. You've got to set your tether. You've got to screw in your bow holder just like you would in a traditional tree stand. But it's definitely a lot faster to set up that Predator or a ring style platform for that matter, as opposed to, pulling that 15-pound boat anchor up the tree and hooking it up with ratchet straps.
Yeah, because I've tried a bunch of methods, and the only way that I've found is what I learned up in Alberta was Jim actually would weld on a little hook to the side of the Lone Wolf to hook onto your harness as you're climbing up so that you didn't have to pull it up. But that's just, there's a lot of messing around with that, and it can be noisy, bouncing back and forth. So the biggest, for me, I want to go up all in one shot. And as you're talking about this, I'm picturing in my head how I would set it up. I could have my bow strapped to my backpack, setting up the sticks like I normally would do, have the platform. I could even hook it onto the side of my pack to be able to grab it off, or you get up and you take off your pack and screw in a little hook to put your pack on there, get the platform out, do that. And again, I'm just thinking of how my system would work and being efficient with it. But I think with a little bit of practice, you could get that down without even having to pull anything up the tree. It just go up in one shot.
So that's what you described is exactly what I do. So the bow stays on my pack, depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I bring a rope and I'll pull my bow up, but it just depends on the hunt that I'm executing. Mm-hmm. But I climb up, bow on my back. I put my little Predator platform, I hook it onto my saddle. There's little molly loops we built into the Mantis, so you can just hang it right there off your hip. So now I'm up at the top of my last climbing stick. I have everything that I need to hunt right there. I set my Predator, which takes about 30 seconds. Tie my tether. Well, you don't even really tie it. You just loop it around the tree and hook it in. So now you're safe. Climb onto the platform, set my bow holder strap, put my pack on there, put my bow on there, and I'm hunting. It's very efficient. Definitely no need to do more than one trip up the tree.
And I did want to note too, from a safety standpoint, you're always tied in because you have the lineman's belt system that would, or tether that goes around the tree, and then you go up and then you can pull out, your actual tether that goes around, and you're always hooked in at some point. There's no, holding on to the tree for dear life for, even a couple seconds. You're always, tied in, at least from the way that I was, messing around with it there with Nick and Allie.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a guy that hunts spots that are preset, obviously the safest method are to set those lines that you hook into at the ground, and then you slide it up as you go. So you're, literally you can't fall. That's obviously the safest method. But if you're finding the tree and hunting it for the first time, there's no way to do that. So the next best thing is to make sure that you use a lineman belt as you climb, which obviously a lineman belt isn't a fail-safe. It's a fall prevention as opposed to like a fall. It's not gonna. If you fall on your lineman belt, there's a good chance that you could still hit the ground, even though most likely you wouldn't, but you could. But that's still, I mean, a lot of guys climb without it. And with the saddle setup, you've got everything right there. So why not use it, and make your hands free to mess around when you get up top, as opposed to hanging onto the tree with one arm.
Yeah, no, that was just something that I saw that I thought was a pretty neat. It makes it a lot easier. It's not an inconvenience to hook up and go, because you're wearing it already. You just throw it around the tree and adjust the Prusik knot as you're going up, depending on how the tree, if it tapers off. So
that's right. Yeah, it's kind of, we made it kind of idiot proof. There's no reason not to be safe with this thing, because like you said, I mean, how many times this may have happened to you? I mean, I know it happened to me, and I know I've got buddies that this scenario has happened to. Street safety harnesses can be very inconvenient. It's 4:00 in the morning. You left the truck. You're at the trailhead. You're heading in. You get half a mile down the road, and you realize you forgot your freaking safety harness. Well, it's like, then you go, well, I think I'll be okay just this one hunt. I'm not going all the way back to get it. So with a tree saddle, if you don't have that, you're not hunting, bro.
Yeah.
You can't leave your safety harness back at the truck. It's impossible.
Yep. No, that's a very, very good point. Yeah, I've been in that situation, and and admittedly taken the risk of just, I'll be good. I'll make sure I won't fall asleep.
Yeah, everybody has, or they didn't leave it in their truck. They left it at the house, and now they've driven 40 minutes to the piece of public they're going to hunt, and they left their safety harness at home. I mean, we've all done it. All done it. It's just that with the saddle setup, it's like I said, it's idiot proof. We made it easy.
Yeah. So, Greg, is there anything else you can think of that we missed that about saddle hunting, or anything else that you think you want to touch on?
I think we covered most of it, but the last thing that I would want to say is that, for somebody that's hearing this for the first time, or maybe not the first time, but they haven't really bought into it yet, I would just say keep an open mind. There are a lot of resources now on YouTube and on the internet, with forums, with articles, how-to articles and blog posts. There's so much information out there now that if you just will take some time to do a little bit of homework and look into the system, you're going to have a really good idea of what you're getting into. And if you'll keep an open mind and give it a try, most people find that it's a really, really good system. Now, it's not going to work for everyone, just like some people prefer a climber over a lock-on, or some people choose a ladder stand and they don't want to hunt out of a climber. Like, I get it. There's personal preferences. It's not going to be for every single person. But if you keep an open mind and you value weight and bulk savings, well, you really need to look into the saddle system, because it's just the best thing going when it comes to lightweight and no bulk.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one person that I saw that did a lot of good stuff with video is Mark Kenyon with Wired to Hunt. He's done a lot of stuff talking about saddle hunting, and then also even the Tethrd website, has the Saddle Hunting 101 page that, answers a lot of questions that you may have. I think we covered a lot of those on here, but there's, do some more research on it, and, maybe it'll fit for you, maybe it won't, but I think it's definitely something you should keep an open mind to, like you said.
Yeah, and if I can give a shameless plug for my YouTube channel, G2 Outdoors, I have done videos breaking down, in the most basic form, every single thing. So you've probably heard some words that you're not familiar with, like a tether, a lineman belt, a predator platform, a mantis. There's all these things, and it can be information overload. But at my YouTube channel, G2 Outdoors, I have done reviews and informational videos in painstakingly simple detail about every single piece of the system. How do you set it up? How do you climb? How are you safe? How do you tie in your tether? Where should you tie in your tether? How do you be comfortable? It just on and on and on and on. Everything that you can think of for a question that you might have about saddle hunting, I have probably done a video explaining it on my channel.
I just, as you're saying that, I just went on YouTube and I subscribed to it, so I'll be checking it out. And if anybody heard a little bit of music there, his first video started playing while I was trying to hit subscribe. But yeah, it looks like you have quite a few videos on it, like you said. So, where else can people find some information on yourself, Tethrd, anything else that you might want to plug here?
Yeah, so if you're interested in getting the saddle set up, just Google Tethrd or go to tethrdnation.com. And we spelled it a little weird. We spelled it Tethrd. I don't think it'll matter, but if you just Google Tethrd Nation or saddle hunting, you'll find the setup. But if you want to learn more, there's a bunch of YouTube channels that you can find. Just type in saddle hunting into YouTube, and you'll find myself at G2 Outdoors. You'll find Flinging Arrows. You'll find the DIY Sportsman, Garrett Prawl. He's done a lot of good videos on saddle hunting, and there's a bunch of others. Taylor Chamberlain with Hunt Urban. He's done a lot of good videos as well. So there's a bunch of YouTube resources out there that can help you learn. And then if you're on social media, you can jump on, if you're on Facebook, you can get on the Saddle Hunter Facebook group, and there's tons of really smart dudes on there that can answer any questions you might have.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's funny, like when you said about spelling Tethrd, I remember when I first heard it, it was before I'd seen it, and for some reason I kept throwing a Y in there. But like you said, when you I'm like, I knew it was spelled different, and I was throwing a Y in between there, and no matter what, it comes up. So you got your SEO stuff figured out.
yeah, that's true. It made for a really cool logo, spelling it wrong, but then every time we're giving out our email address, it's like we have to spell it out. That's TETHRD. It's kind of annoying, but
oh, awesome. Yeah, some afterthoughts there, but
first world problems.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, Greg, thank you very much for coming on and explaining the saddle hunting system and what you guys have to offer at Tethrd. So thank you.
Yeah, man, you got it.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.